Hi, I'm Michael Lenz, host of Beyond the Headlines. Join me on my next show as I sit down with Maureen Sager, Project Director of the Alliance for the Creative Economy, to talk about the impact her organization is having here in upstate New York and their plans for the future. I'll see you then. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Michael Lenz. On today's show, I'll be talking with Maureen Sager, Project Director of the Alliance for the Creative Economy, about the impact her organization is having here in upstate New York and their plans for the future. I'll talk with Maureen when we come back. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm pleased to be joined today by Maureen Sager. She's the Project Director for the Alliance for the Creative Economy, also known as ACE. Maureen is also the Executive Director of the Spring Street Gallery, an award-winning art and performance space here in Saratoga Springs, and the Executive Director of the Nordlease Foundation. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this. I know we want to talk about ACE, the Alliance for the Creative Economy. But before we kind of dive into that, why don't we talk about your background and how you got to this point where you're now heading up this wonderful organization?
Sure. I can tell you that I moved up here from New York City. I moved to Saratoga Springs, actually, from New York City 13 years ago. I had a long career in the entertainment industry. I went to film school when I was done with college and got a master's degree in screenwriting, and then went to business school afterwards because I really liked the business side of the entertainment industry. And I worked in many different fields. I was in publishing and television and film. The last position I had before I moved up here was at Nickelodeon, and I ran nickjr.com, which was the world's largest website for parents and preschoolers. Mm-hmm.
And as the parent of 4 children, we utilize that quite often. So
sure, me too.
Great job, and I love the screenwriting background as well. Such a varied background that you bring to this. So let's talk about the Alliance for the Creative Economy. What exactly? Well, before we talk about that, let's talk about what is the creative economy.
Sure.
So, I think we need to define that for our viewers because as we talked before we went on camera, there is a huge segment of our population, not only locally, but all over the country, that is really embracing this creative economy. So what is that?
Sure. The creative economy, that term came about probably 20 years ago. It first started being used. We applied it locally about 4 years ago by doing a report that showed that the creative industries were at that time the 6th largest employer in the region. We were shocked. Mm-hmm. The term creative economy becomes powerful because it's a reconsideration of creative content. You would likely think, if I asked you what's in the creative economy, you would probably tell me it's performing arts. Mm-hmm. Easy to know, right? Cafe Lena and UPH and SPAC. That's very easy to see that's what the creative economy is. Also, all the performers that go into it, that would be very easy to consider. Visual arts, galleries and museums and the Tang. What we wouldn't have considered before probably was scoping in food, culinary arts and agriculture, right? The craft beer explosion that's happening here and driving so much of the economy is a handmade product, right? There's the people who brew beer, if you've ever met them, or distill liquors, give it that same consideration and that specialized intent when they make that thing. That's no different from a work of art, right? Mm-hmm. That bottle of liquor is a work of art, and their life and experience went into it. So by considering that, when we start to broaden that definition and consider all the parts that go into a creative economy, we would have to also consider media, right? We're sitting in a creative economy business. Mm-hmm. So the film and television industry, radio, podcasting, which you're saying that you do, mm-hmm. The media is a huge driver of the local economy. Also, design, graphic design is part of every product now, right? It's our main differentiator of how you enter a marketplace. You can't have an unbranded product. So those marketing businesses, landscape architectures, architects in general, those are all part of the design segment. So when we consider all of it together, all of those people that have cultural content and creative content as part of their product, that is now the fourth largest employment sector in the capital region.
That's
and
amazing.
It accounts for, I'm going to throw in one more statistic,
Yeah, sure.
It accounts for $1.4 billion in earnings just in these 8 counties. So that's news.
That's huge news.
It's
And
huge.
when you start to, I agree with you completely. When you think creative, you typically think performance.
Right.
That's where everybody goes,
Yeah.
especially within our community, because we have a strong performance segment.
We do.
But there are so many other areas, as you mentioned. And I remember when I was in office, we had to do a study for the racing industry. We were trying to gauge what the economic impact was. And when we got the report back, we were just blown away by the amazing financial impact that all of the subsidiary organizations and groups and businesses had, like the people that grew the hay, that fed
Sure.
the horses. I mean,
Absolutely.
all those subset categories was an incredible economic impact. And you had cited the study that you had done that showed that there are so many areas within this creative economy that you may not think about initially. I think there was something in this about the accountant that works for
Absolutely.
the company that may create something. So there's so many different areas, aren't there?
Absolutely. If we broaden it and think about the accountant who works at SPAC and the people who are not directly creative but are employed by creative industries, the numbers grow to about 47, almost 50,000 people in the region who are employed and affected by creative industries.
And when we talk about in the study that you were referencing and the area that you were looking at, just for our viewers, what area are we talking about in terms
Sure.
of upstate?
Sure. The state, I didn't know this before I started working on this project. The state is broken into economic development zones. Our zone is the capital region. Saratoga is one of the 8 counties. You want me to tell you the 8 counties?
You don't have to say them all.
Okay, but I can tell you that it goes from about Hudson to about Glens Falls.
Yeah.
It's big and varied. It has many cities in it. It has 6 cities, which would be Hudson, Saratoga, Albany, Schenectady, Troy, and Glens Falls. Those are big cities, and as you know, many others that surround those. So that's.
And I know that we're going to take a break and come back on this, but I know that when we were talking before we went on, that when you think about some of these big cities, New York, Boston, some of these areas where people instantly think of as creative meccas, that in the upstate area, even though we have all of these creative areas, creating this alliance was important to be able to go out there and show what you can do. So let's take a quick break because I want to talk about that more specifically when we come back.
Okay.
Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a minute. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm here with Maureen Sager. She is the Executive Director for the Alliance for the Creative Economy. And so many areas we can go into in terms of this conversation. But we were talking about exactly what the creative economy is and what it represents in terms of jobs and percentages of the economy. Pretty impressive when you put that all together and look at it. And you have a really nice pamphlet that people can look at that really breaks it out very nicely. But I want to talk a little bit about how you're doing things within this alliance, because when we think about places like the Berkshires, right, that have a much smaller population base, but market themselves as a creative performance type location for people to come to fairly effectively, because people associate them with that. Are there challenges here in this area in upstate New York? Because we do so many things so well, is it hard to get people focused on the creativity, and is that why you form this alliance to go out there and market it?
Sure. We think that there is vast potential by starting to gather together. And so this is, the ACE is 4 years old, and we have started that conversation, rolling it in over those 4 years. When people arrive here, you probably met Elizabeth Sobel, who runs SPAC. They arrive here and they are completely shocked at everything we have here. One of the reasons that shock exists is because we haven't really articulated that case of what exist here, right? So when we started doing just the first kind of inventory of how many arts and culture and restaurants and public facing, let's say, anything that the public could walk into, how many public facing institutions we have that serve in a tourist sense. We have hundreds of them, whereas in the Berkshires or Vermont or any of those international destinations, they actually have fewer. What they have is a more effective marketing plan and how they articulate themselves. And so that's something that we're trying to explore and advocate for, is to say, by joining together and looking past our particular city or our particular industry, right? By joining together restaurants, creative people, and talking about who's here and what we have here, we start to have this us, right? We can play this, we just haven't done it yet. And so that's what we're looking for, people who want to talk about that. And many have joined as members. We're a self-funded organization at this point because we believe so strongly in the potential for this region. And that is not just powerful from a tourism standpoint, it's extremely powerful from a business standpoint, because it allows us to have big companies here, and it's one of the reasons we have global foundries over at Exit 12, right? Is the depth of resources that we have for people who would want to live here and move here. Young people have a lot of options here. Businesses have a giant talent pool because we have 1.1 million people. We have 24 higher educational institutions. So that is a rich proposition for beyond tourism, for business, for anybody, and to attract residents. So we just think we have a great case. We haven't really spoken of much.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have gone out and done some roundtable discussions throughout the region. Tell me how those have gone.
Sure. We did 6 of those roundtable tours, and we were hoping, we did them in the middle of winter, and we were hoping, gosh, if 25 people came out just to talk and tell us what is happening up in Glens Falls or down in Hudson, that would be great. We had over 100 people at each of our stops. We couldn't even hear each other talk because so many people wanted to weigh in. And creatives feel strongly about things. You know this yourself. Like we care about this topic. And so the outpouring of enthusiasm was staggering. We were quite shocked. So we gathered hundreds and hundreds of people and heard what they have to say. And their interest in this topic was quite overwhelming. We have a lot of, let's say in a business sense, we have a lot of gas in the tank. There's a lot to be spoken about and people to be joined together who are interested in what we've been talking about right here. Because everybody would like to see this go forward, and just how to move this region forward is worth talking about.
Well, and the fact is that from a creative standpoint, I would probably make the case that most people are creative at heart. There's some creativity in there. They may not have manifested it yet, but there's also a lot of freelancers, I being one of them, who have worked full-time in some other field while they built their freelance or creative business in the margins, as I say. So they're almost everybody, even those people in the mainstream work environment, on the side they're doing a little screenwriting. On the side they have a podcast. They're doing voiceover. They're doing improv. They're performing on weekends in a band or solo. So there's there's that aspect as well. That when we think of the creative economy, it doesn't just mean SPAC or some performing arts venue. It's almost everybody and anybody that's out there who's a creative, whether it's full-time or part-time.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 16,000 creative freelancers in this region. That is bigger than the entire insurance industry in the capital region. That's a staggering number. And we have a higher concentration of creative freelancers than in New York City or Boston.
Yeah, I read that in your
Isn't that
brochure,
crazy?
and I was like, what?
It's easier to do it here, right? I would never freelance in Brooklyn. My rent was absurd, and all of my costs were too high, and you work too much, right? When you move up here or when people relocate, it gives them the room to explore those things. And that's what makes this region very special. We heard that over and over again by people who have moved here or moved back here because they grew up here and moved to the cities. There's something very special about the community and the opportunities that we have here. the community helps, right? When we meet each other, we start
Right.
talking and come up with ideas of how we start hiring each other, actually, you know, and start leveraging each other's talents. That's the way that this creative freelancer pool works here. It's quite something. It's much stronger than I ever experienced in New York.
And having been in both worlds, I've been in full time working in the margins, and now full time doing podcasting, VO, and TV. And I found that you're absolutely right. Creatives help other creatives. I actually find it more satisfying to refer a friend for a job than to get the job myself. I enjoy that. And when we get back, I want to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to talk about how these barriers to creativity really are being broken down and how everybody can participate in this creative economy. But let's take a quick break and we'll get back to that after the break.
Sure.
Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a minute. Hi, welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm here with Maureen Sager. We're continuing our discussion about the Alliance for the Creative Economy. And Maureen, before the break, we were talking about how amazing it is that these barriers to creativity are just being broken down. So we have people who can do screenwriting on the side. They can download a screenwriting program and they can start screenwriting as soon as they want to. They can create a movie on their iPhone that is an amazing movie. We've seen this. They want to write a book, they can go on CreateSpace and self-publish their book. They don't have to worry about going through a traditional publisher if they don't want to. So they can create podcasts. There's all these things that people can do. It's amazing how we're able to just smash these barriers down, isn't it?
Yeah, and creatives move very easily into those spaces. It's predicted, let's say, that 50% of the U.S. workforce will be freelance within the next 10 years. That is a pretty solid statistic, and in fact, that's where everybody's coming in at. We're already there, the creative fields are, because this is easy to us, right? It's like second nature. You see someone else doing something like that, and you think, I can do that. And it's true. You can, right? You can try all those things. There used to be a lot of barriers when we were growing up of what you could do and where you could work. That's just not true anymore. It's really exciting. I'm having a great time. It sounds like you are too.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But the creative aspect of being able to some extent, control what it is that you do and how you do it is incredibly rewarding. And as you said, it used to be way back when you had to fit into a particular mold, and now people are just creating their own molds, which I think is very exciting. So let's talk about specifically what your organization is out there doing in the community. So tell us some of the projects you've worked on.
Sure. The most visible part of ACE are the events that we throw. We do 2 events a month at least. We have 3 actually coming up in the next month. We have a series of events where on the first Wednesdays of the month in one of the 8 counties, we have a mixer. So everybody from the creative economy and anyone who even wants to know what it is can come meet other people. We usually have a topic that we talk about. In fact, next month it's going to be about digital media, just a topic that we bring in. And we bring in food and beer and all those local products that are handmade. We bring them in and we talk about it. And people hang out and start doing business right away. It's very funny, and forming friendships that really are brought in. It would be very difficult to meet someone from another county, but when we gather all in the same place, it's very easy to start seeing who's out there, right? So these mixers have been great fun. We also do business tours. We bring people inside to sort of break down what the creative economy is. We bring people inside of factories, inside of workplaces, construction sites, hilarious things that you wouldn't think, that you'd think, why would anyone want to tour that? But when you put it in context of the creative economy and understand the economic impact, the jobs, the opportunities that are there, they've been fascinating tours. So we have a tour this month where we're touring Nine Pin Cider in Albany. They will talk about their business plans and the way that they started, and they could have started any day, right? They were just people who thought, this is what I want to do. And there are people like that all over this region. And so we just create opportunities for people to meet. So we're very event driven, and people could participate in that way quite easily.
And I know from personal experience, when you are around other creatives, when you're around other entrepreneurs, because creatives are at heart entrepreneurs, that you feed on that. you don't copy them, but you learn from them. There's certain things that you'll see, like, oh, I didn't think about that. How do I apply that to my business? So that interaction is a powerful thing.
Yeah, we're contagious, right?
We are.
The enthusiasm is contagious. It's great fun.
So what types of businesses would qualify to become a member of ACE?
Sure. There are two very different levels of how to participate with ACE. One is an investing organization where there's a financial commitment because, as I had mentioned, we are self-funded right now. And if it's a business that sees this as core to their mission, they move pretty easily into that conversation. We have people who, we have organizations that are not-for-profits, for-profits. We have philanthropic organizations like the Community Foundation of the Greater Capital Region was one of our original investors. We started with 6 investors 18 months ago, and we're up to 22. And that's just a way to support the whole organization. But anybody who wants to participate, there's no cost at all. Just put your name on our mailing list at our website, and you're really welcome to come to any of the events. We like carrying this message, and it's exciting for people who are already involved to meet new people from new places.
No question about it. Now, what are some of the plans for ACE in the future going forward? I mean, you've gathered all this data, you've got these wonderful roundtable discussions that you've had, you've got these creative group sessions and meetings. Coalescing this all together, what are some of the plans for the future?
Sure. We have decided to coalesce around 3 big topics this year, and we'll address other things as well, but we really want to take a crack at that regional branding, right? To push this conversation forward where what we had started talking about is articulating our case for this region, right? And have that ground and led by creatives, because there is so much creative content here and it has such appeal for other business sectors. Another section is cultural tourism, right? Why not try bringing all of our assets together and creating plans and maps and some kind of scope for what this place is, so that all of us can start promoting this region in a way that makes sense. And we're also putting the stake down and saying, you know what, this is the best place in the nation to be a freelancer, a creative freelancer. Move here. We want people to know, and people are already moving here, and yet we want more of them, right? This gets only more fun and has the rich depth of talent is a driving force for all of other businesses too. You can just pick up a phone and have a top drawer cinematographer, graphic designer, landscape architect. Once you do that, all the business community benefits from having that rich pool of talent. So those are our main stake in the grounds. Also, diversity matters to us quite a bit, and we're going to have quarterly events that address diversity in the creative industries.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many areas that you could focus on.
There are.
It's got to be tough to kind of zero in on kind of the big 3, but you know, we're 2.5 hours away from New York, Boston, Montreal. We know, we're probably preaching to the choir to a certain extent. Those people who are watching us know that this is a terrific place to grow yourself creatively. There's no question about it. So how can people become involved with ACE very quickly?
Sure. The easiest way to do that would be to go to our website, which is upstateace.org. You can find all the data that we talked about because there's a lot of it and it's a little bit dense, but good to have in your hand to understand what the creative economy is. And also there you'll find a listing of the events that we're doing, and that would be the easiest way to get started.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we'll try to make sure that we get this brochure up on the Look Media website as well. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me. This was a great conversation. I know we could continue this conversation for a long time, but we do have to wrap things up. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Why don't you stay around for just a minute, and I will come back to wrap things up. I want to thank my guest, Maureen Sager, Project Director of the Upstate Alliance for the Creative Economy, for joining me today. And thank you for tuning in. Join me next time as we continue our discussion with the business and political leaders shaping the news here in Saratoga Springs and the surrounding communities. Until then, for everyone here at Look Media, I'm Michael Lenz. Thanks for spending part of your day with us.